Good morning, everybody. This is Stephen Pugh of the Home Bible College. I want to do another video number 19 on the Pastors Course. And this particular video is based on the simple designation. It's D, and it's begin to make notes of all the religions, cults, and philosophies. Okay? Now, some of you may never have done this. Somebody may know a little bit about it, but you may not know very much. So the Christian pastor then needs to become conversant with all the major and significant religions and cults and human philosophies. This may sound a bit obvious, but there's no substitute for research before the need arises to be able to enter into conversation and give answers to the questions that may arrive. Let's look at some of the world statistics. Christianity, estimated, this is quite a while ago, estimated as 1.973 billion people. In the United Kingdom, it's estimated to be 135 million. Okay, a big number. Now, Islam is estimated to be about 1.28 billion. Okay, and in the United States, it's estimated to be about 6 million. Okay, do you have any notes on Islam? Do you really understand what that religion is all about, what its features are, what its sacred texts are, how the religion is organized, what the local leaders are called, and so on? So this is a very interesting study. And of course, there's Buddhism, which has over 400 million. In the United States is 1.5 million. And then there's Hinduism. Hinduism has 820 million, twice the size of Buddhism, estimated at 1.5 million in the United States. And then there's Judaism, estimated at 14.2 million. It's not so many, by a fraction, and estimated to be about 6 million in the United States. And this is just the start. There's a lot more significant religions in the world than just these 5. Now, we need to, when we're making notes on these religions, we need to just note the general features, okay? The general features of what the religion is, what their sacred texts are, what their leaders are called, what is the essence of the religion, what is it that they believe about God and about salvation and about the scriptures and so on. So this is a fascinating study all in itself. Now, on top of that, begin a series of files on the different cults. Okay? Now, the general features of the cult. A cult is a system of unusual or unorthodox religious worship as expressed in ritual, devotion, or homage to a person, an object, or a philosophy. And there's a number of general features of a cult. Let me give them to you. And there's quite a few of them. First of all cults will have extra biblical revelation or new truth from the scriptures. Okay, a new interpretation. They will, generally speaking, have a denial of the deity of Christ, but not always. They will always have some faulty teaching with regard to the person of God himself. They will normally teach salvation by works. There's something that you have to do in order to be saved or to remain saved. There's also a double talk. There's also hypocrisy. There are some inner illogical features. So, for example, they might talk about one thing but do something else. This is very common, for example, in the Jehovah's Witnesses, where in one country they would tell people that you mustn't go to war, you must be a pacifist. But in another country they would encourage people to pay bribes so that they didn't have to go to war. So this is a moral inconsistency. Double talk. Another one is changing theology. It's very common for cults to have change of theology over time, and that's always a disconcerting thing. Another feature is that they have an autocratic leadership. That they make false prophecies, that they are legalistic in character, that they exercise mind control at some level over the people that attend the cult. They take an anti-Christian stance. Okay, all cults will do this. They'll say, oh no, Christianity, or Christian churches. All Christian churches are wrong. We're the only ones that are right. They also take an anti-moral stand. Generally speaking, there is sin found within the cult at some level or at some degree in a widespread way. There is also the exaltation of man to deity. They will tell you that when you become a member of their cult, you become a sort of a god. Or if you don't become a god, then you aspire to become a god. Okay, this is a very common feature. There's also an exclusivism and an intolerance of all sorts of other people, anybody. Okay, I know people in cults, and everything's fine with them until they discover I'm a Christian, and once they discover that, gone, finished. Don't want to talk to you. That's a very bad sign of a cult. A utopian millennial dream. Now they have this idea. Now we all know about the millennium that the Bible talks about, but in the cults they have a sort of a twisted view of the millennium in which they and they alone are going to be the only ones that are going to come into God's millennial blessing. One of the disconcerting features of a cult is secrecy and anonymity. Okay, and lastly, it may go as no surprise that they have a highly organized structure. Now, there's nothing wrong with being highly organized, okay? But this is a highly organized structure in a different way. This is like a lawyer's firm. This is like a printing firm. This is like the management of some sort of business. That's the point. So they're highly organized structure. Now, recruitment into the cults generally comes at a time of stress and change, and the cults will attempt to create an emotional response to their message. Usually it's fear, and the cult will attempt to change the person. So they change everything. They changed how you sleep, they changed how you eat, they changed what you drink, they change your medical viewpoint, they change language, they give you all sorts of new words to learn, they change morality, they may even change your occupation, your historical perspective, your study focus, your lifestyle, your peer group, your authority figures, your family focus, your clothing, your future prospect, yourself, your thought processes, and your self perspective. Now, the army has been doing this forever. In the army, they use a very intensive form of training which makes people willing to obey commands that they wouldn't normally obey in ordinary life. And the final effect of this sort of brainwashing and so on of a person means a person that's unable to feel correctly and unable to think independently. That's the ultimate aim in a cult. Now, how do you help somebody that's in a cult? Well, that's a difficult question. The big thing, of course, is to try to re-establish all normal family relationships and experiences and to help them to think for themselves. That's the aim. Pray for the person. Keep your friends praying too. Study the cults broadly, but not from the cult material. Very important. Seek to establish normal contact with a person. Shop and chat and go for a walk together. Contact cult experts for advice on how you or your church leader would be able to encourage them to find a good, ordinary, Bible-based Christian church and help to fill the gap that will exist in that person's life when they leave the cult. When they've called to your door, people do call at your door, you need to be very careful. Don't argue. They're very well trained about arguing. Don't get drawn into a programmed conversation. Don't buy or accept free literature, but don't be rude. And don't be afraid to interrupt the flow of the conversation. Don't answer leading questions. Don't be afraid to say no. Don't be afraid to say, I don't know. Be very careful about saying yes, because this is you being led along a series of logical points in which you will then accept that they are correct in what they do. You need to treat everything that's said with a great deal of reservation. Give your Christian testimony. Sit down and read 2 chapters of John's Gospel with little or no comment. These people have probably never ever done that. They've never sat down without supervision to be able to read for themselves. So let me ask you the few questions at the end. What religions have you come into contact with? That's the first question. You say, well, I can't remember. Well, we just make a list. Make a list of the religions that you've come into contact with. What cults have you come into contact with? What features of cults have you noticed among them? Have you begun to make a list of all the religions and begun to research them? That's the big question. Have you begun to understand and to research who they really are? Have you begun a list of all the cults and begun to research them? How do you approach a cult person who comes to your door? I mean, how do you approach it? And how would you deal with a cult person who knocks on your door at church? These are big questions, aren't they? These are difficult ones. You need to be very astute. You need to be very wise. You need to be as wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove. You know, there's certain types of people, sometimes they need from you a brisk response. Sometimes they need a kindly word. So that's the difficulty. That's for you to figure out. That's for you to decide. Well, we look forward to catching up with you on our next session. Have a great day. God bless you. Bye for now.